comments too. Oh, I never even said what part this is. That was a long part. Part two of our theories of
2.5.
all of Bendy, but it's like part 20 or 30 something.
Oh, I see.
In total.
Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't look that up beforehand.
Part two of our overarching theories.
Overall theories, yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about invisible ink. Now, Ariel, this part's going to get very confusing, so if you have either, or Alden too, you can be confused too. If either of you are like, hey, clarify on something, feel free to tell me, because I've summed up a lot of theories where we can get through a lot of them, so I don't go into every single detail about how we reach each theory. So please let me know. That's what the links are for in the description. Like always, I forgot to mention this last video, but always the description of all these sources of the theories are in the description by their people that are made. So go check them out, because they also have more theories that are cool. But anyway, so the Dreamfisher especially has a lot of different ideas about the ink, and I think a lot of them are worth mentioning. Some ideas kind of counter each other, but I think it's a good idea to mention a lot of them, for then we can decide what we feel about this ink.
Okay.
So the first one is about pencils. So, pencils. So this first idea is that we've been able to tell pretty early on that it doesn't seem like Henry, at least alone, is writing all these messages. And one evidence to support that is that in this group of drawings that we have here, which is, you can see in chapter 5 when you first get the seeing tool, that the words here, there are in 2 different handwritings, and also one's in pencil and one's in ink. And the Bendy handbook even points this out as well. Oh, I'm going to mispronounce this, and this is a person that does a lot. Halfus, Halfusek. Person that will run a lot of fan events. Or at least
Halfusek?
Halfusek, yeah. So they also notice, besides being a different handwriting, that there also seem to be written in pencil, which at first I would say not that important, because whatever. But the thing is, the game and the Twitter does emphasize there is kind of a difference between the two. So we see we have the Twitter here that has pencil or pen, and then also this note is in Joey's real home. It says just a pencil and a dream, which cross out just a pen and a nightmare. So the game kind of puts an emphasis between the two. And so also what's interesting is that since we know the new protagonist is an Alice, could it be this new protagonist that is writing in pencil? Plus, the Dreamfisher added onto this idea. It's worth noting that the theme song of the seeing tool is named Another World Revealed. It would be interesting if Henry and the new protagonist are in 2 different versions of the studio, but the secret messages show up the same for both of them, and it's their way of communicating. So this is still ideas, a lot of ideas, but I think it was very interesting to see in Dark Revival if any of this starts to become true. And so if we start seeing different things with pencil versus pen, or ink versus pencil, it might be a thing to know and try to look into. It makes me wonder if they want to emphasize that pencil is good while ink is bad, because ink is with nightmares and pencils is with dreams. But we'll see how that goes as things play out.
It would be interesting if they play with this theme a little more, or if maybe we figure out what they've already played with. Because I think the concept of pencil and pen is cool, especially for a drawing game, because pencil is really, it's erasable, right? You can change it, but pen is permanent. And I feel like the whole time loop theory and being stuck somewhere could really play into that theme a lot, but I don't really know how.
Yeah, it definitely could. You doing pineapple pen? Especially since it's the ink, and the ink is such a permanent thing. So how you're stuck in that loop, it's the same loop because it's made out of ink. So we'll have to see if we notice anything in Dark Revival, because that would be a fun thing to mention figure out as we play it.
I'll keep that one in mind.
Yeah. So now that we have this idea that there's someone else that can write in the invisible ink and in pencil, let's make this more confusing, because this isn't Bendy unless we make this more confusing. So we can't trust that pencil equals other person, because Henry also draws in pencil, and we seem to get a response in ink. So we got some of their things here. We can see that it seems like he drew in pencil, but it says you draw beautifully, which would be weird if he said that to himself. But if I remember correctly, the cutscene in chapter 5, Like, this is only partially drawn, and then, like, it is more completed as we go through that cutscene, which it implies pretty heavily that that means Henry was doing. But so the Dreamfisher's ideas was maybe the conversation took place across multiple loops. When Henry would write in pencil, the other person would respond in ink, and when Henry would write in ink, the other person would respond in pencil, which can work. So I tried to figure out who was who, but it's really hard, because words that would make sense as Henry are in like the different handwriting that was mentioned in like the in this book here, the Employee Handbook. But now the ideas that come from this are a little confusing, so I'm literally just going to quote the Dreamfisher for the rest of this part of this theory, because I can't sum it up any easier. So one important clue is the spoon door. The door that we go through to get the spoon. So anyway, sorry. From the spoon door, which obviously had to have been prepared before Henry was locked in the cell, because that's what we used to escape the cells. We hit the spoon, go through the door. So what's more, the kindly beast points out that the messages spoon, escape, were left by the same person. So we got spoon and escape. You can see that in pencil. Would suggest that person who organized the escape for Henry, and this tells us 3 very important details. The spoon door person is in the same reality as Henry, as their actions have a direct effect on his surroundings. So if they were located in an alternative reality, they presumably wouldn't be able to prepare the spoon door for Henry. The spoon door person remembers past loops, which is how they know that messages weren't left by someone who used to occupy the hideout before they arrived. They know Henry will be locked there in the future from their point of view, so they can actually do something to prepare his escape. Now, the spoon door person knows about the things inside the vault. The last point is especially important, considering that when we arrive in the administration, we can see this. We can see this. This is what they're referring to as this. A picture of the seeing tool over the golden messages left by someone who could see it and knows about the seeing tool. The handprints leading from inside the vault to the room with Wally's audio log and an empty reel box, and that's what these things are pointing to right here. Henry revealed to some creature the location of something very important. The creature followed his instructions and took something from inside the vault. Presumably it was the missing part of Tombstone picnic reel, which is this one here, because that, with the appearance of the mysterious shadowy figure. Where did they take it? What did they do with it? Are their intentions good? I doubt it. I suspect Henry was tricked by the one-eyed Bendy. So I know I have not discussed the one-eyed Bendy theory yet. That's actually going to be in our next part. But just for you right now, just imagine that is someone else that we don't really know who it is, but that's just someone else that we haven't met yet that is in this game, we believe.
I wanted to to go back.
Go for it.
It's kind of a simpleton kind of thing, but you said that some people write in pencil and some people write in pen.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like it could also be the same person ultimately. Maybe they're kind of either like a split personality thing, or even just like a simple kind of thing, like a regular human thing where your pen runs out of ink. So you just pick up a pencil instead, right? You just look for another tool to keep on writing. So maybe it's not necessarily a different person. Maybe it's just the Henry or whoever has been through so many times that they've run out of ink. So they pick up a pencil, right? Something that's going to last a little bit longer than a pen's ink. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think the only argument against that is that how it says don't go through the door, and then they answer what door, and then they cross out things like they're communicating something. But your split personality thing does work, and we will actually discuss that in a little bit.
Right.
So that is definitely something. I know this theory itself is like very confusing because it kind of goes on to the idea that there's something going on and someone took something from the vault, which isn't like something we really discussed. And then there's this Who's Laughing Now is like one of the places that would put one of the cartoons, but it's missing. The cartoon missing, and I think it's actually Tombstone Picnic, which is the one that isn't there. I would have to go back and check. I forgot to double check that one. But that is kind of the idea that there's something else going on, something important we've been missing behind the scenes, which is something I really believe in. There's just too many questions left with no possible answer that I personally believe that there has to be someone or something behind things. Like, there's too many times where the footprints in chapter 1, we still haven't figured out. There's still so much that's kind of like very obviously like what is going on that it makes me really believe in this, that there's something else happening. But yeah, any comments on that? Anything more before I move forward?
No.
Sounds good. That's fine. We got a lot to talk about. So now that we discussed that long, confusing topic, it wouldn't be Bendy if we didn't add more noise to this theory. So we're going to address 2 other things about the invisible ink real quick, and then we can discuss overall about the ink. So, the thing is, so the Dreamfisher looked through the game files and discovered there's more secrets with the ink that actually hasn't been found. So these 2 messages you don't see in the game, but based off the files, we should be able to do something in the game that would trigger these images to appear. So these are hacked in right now, these images, so you can actually see what they would look like. But the thing is, we still haven't figured out how to trigger these images to appear. They're definitely both in chapter 1. Well, that one could be chapter 5 because we see Henry's desk twice, but I believe they both should be in chapter 1. And so I think that's crazy. We still haven't figured out how to trigger these messages that obviously can be triggered. And 2, this means unless we do something to get that spray can I talked about in part 1 that is in that bathroom, someone else can write in invisible ink, which we already established, but they would be written, oh gosh, it would be written, they would be assuming as, like, it's written as, like, what we've been saying is Henry's handwriting, which means that it's not Henry's handwriting unless we, like, whatever you do to trigger it, we end up going to the bathroom and getting that thing, or doing something else that we don't know about because we don't know so much. So it makes, like, it's hard to say, like, what's Henry's handwriting, because, like, that also, like, this kind of handwriting we see throughout the studio too, I feel like, in normal ink, and it's just so hard to tell anymore who's in what handwriting. Besides Spoon, Escape, and I think Door, I think are the ones that are, like, confirmed. Actually, I have it right here, where it says Ink, Spoon, and Escape. This one is, like, in the handbook, and it says is in a different handwriting. So it's very interesting that they point out those 3 things, and we're just like, who knows about everything else? So, besides that there's ink that can somehow appear by something that we do, there's also invisible ink that actually appear every time we play, and it's this name on the coffins right here. In chapter 2. You could just say, oh, they forgot to put it in chapter 1, and then when it loads in chapter 2, it loads up. But the Dreamfisher goes through the game files, and they explain it more, and I'm not going to, but based off what they found, it's very unlikely that it's a mistake, and they probably did this on purpose. Which we're going to assume for, I don't have to go over that whole theory, and people can look in the description if they want to see the details. Which means Henry either forgets writing something and moving his axe around between passing out and waking up, or while we are passed out on the pentagram, someone writes those names and moves our axe. And I'm sure someone has mentioned it before, but it makes me wonder how permanent these messages are. So the tally marks in chapter 1 makes me feel like the messages stay in all the loops, because there's always 414, or even our messages back and forth with the pencil person seems like we are communicating through different loops. But if the golden messages stay, why does this one appear each time? Why are there some that we haven't gotten to appear yet? There's one last idea that I feel like might make the most sense, but we got a lot of process here. So I'm only using part of this. Well, it was more of a conversation that the Dreamfisher was answering a question from someone. But I'm just going to talk about part of the theory that is linked, that applies to what we're talking about right now. So now I'll be discussing the book in our next part, because we have books that released, and my opinion on how canon it is in the next video. But without explaining the book yet, there's a character named Buddy, and he turns into a Boris. Now, what's interesting is in that book, he says that himself and Boris have a different set of memories. Sometimes Buddy's mind is asleep while Boris is active, and vice versa, which we have to assume some things here. But if Henry is some sort of ink creature, which is not too big of a stretch to believe, then maybe Henry passes out in the end of chapter 1, and whoever he is wakes up and writes the names in the coffins and moves his axe. But maybe whoever he is... maybe whoever he is in, like, between chapter 4 and chapter 5 when we're writing messages is just him going between him and whatever character he is, writing back and forth. And I really like this idea, but then we have to answer some questions. So we mentioned part 1 of our video that we think Henry doesn't have access to the spray to make the invisible ink, which would explain why we only see 414 tally marks on the wall. But if he doesn't have the spray and he's not writing the messages, then how do we see them appear in Chapter 2 Coffins? So my only idea is that we are actually just playing the 414th loop over and over, but that also doesn't make the most sense, especially when you throw in that you have to trigger all the jump flashes in one game in order to unlock the secret ink tunnel in Chapter 1 and get the scythe in your next game, which makes me think that in what you do in one loop can affect the other loop. So with all of that in mind, what's your guys' take on the invisible ink, and like who or how many people are writing it, and is it permanent through the loops? This is why I wrote a script. There's no way I was remembering that discussion.
Okay.
You got a lot of process. I know, I just threw a lot at you.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But basically the idea is, like, I thought they were permanent until, hold on. I thought it was permanent until basically we got things like this appearing. If this didn't appear every single time, I would say these are permanent, and maybe this is what is created whatever we trigger. But the thing is, this gets created every single time, but which makes me think we're just in the same loop and we just don't realize it. But then, like, why can we do stuff like trigger that special thing in Chapter 5 with the Scythe and Sammy, and then we end up going into a different colored dimension? Like, that makes me think the loops do matter. So that's why it's confusing.
Yeah. I mean, it is confusing. And also, like, if we're on the 414th loop and supposedly we've been giving ourselves notes on how to get through it, why are we so clueless on our 414th time?
Loop.
Right. Like, because, like, sometimes if it's Henry writing everything, then it just, like, why is sometimes he can give advice and sometimes he has no idea, and maybe that is the multi-personality thing, but then it's like, yeah, when we're passed out, how do things appear?
Yeah, which then we have to go into the whole thing, maybe Henry's written none of these, and then
right,
I think it all can make sense then. I think that's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's hard when they have things like, who am I now? Like, Henry, or whoever's writing the ink writes this in the mirror, and you think Henry's going to look in the mirror, but, like, it goes back to the whole big picture of maybe someone's guiding Henry through this, like, making Henry, like, go through, if he has no memory, going through this thinking that he wrote it. Maybe we're supposed to think that Henry wrote this, but it's really someone else trying to get us to go somewhere and do something for us.
Yeah.
Which is something like, which goes back to, like, this whole theory here, that there's something else happening and something trying to guide us to do something that they want us to do.
Yeah.
Which is sad they didn't really explain that by the end of the game, but hey, Dark Revival. So
yeah, true.
We'll
I mean,
see.
I really like that theory a lot, but yeah, I wish it was more fleshed out.
Yeah.
Like I wish it was a little more obvious by the end. It makes me think that maybe that's not what they were going for, but it works really well and it's good.
It does work really well.
Yeah.
So any other comments on ink before we move on to Coffins?
I don't know. I think it's kind of like, I don't know, the way I look at it, it's kind of like the Prisoner of Azkaban, where Henry, in my opinion, is still just helping himself, like, and it's just, he's kind of in a time loop, and he just doesn't realize that he's helping himself, and so he just keeps on but he's stuck in a loop, and he's going forever and ever, and then when you say, like, oh, but he gets help here, and he gets help here, it's because in the time loop, he has to go there and help. Like in Harry Potter, he ultimately has to save himself from the Dementors, right? But he's thinking that it's someone else the whole time, right? But in the end, it's him that goes out there
from another
and
time.
he saves himself from another time.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned how, like, oh, he can help himself, and then you go into the black and white world. But I think he's still stuck in the same, it's still the same loop, it's just an alternate reality, It's kind of like how Doctor Strange pictures the, millions of ways that they can lose, and there's only one way they can win. It's ultimately, you're
Just
still
another
stuck
way.
as a loser, but it's just a different
color.
alternate reality, right? Or it's just a different reality, but in the end you're still stuck in the loop,
spot.
so you still lose. That's not a win. It's not the one win in a million chances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that too, but then if that was the case, I wish there was some sort of point to that in the story that shows that you want to help yourself. Like if they gave us the spray can and had us write one thing in the end of the game or something, or something that indicated that we know that we need to help whoever else is stuck here, even if we don't think it's going to be us because we don't know about the loop.
Yeah.
Like there's no drive for us to help anybody in the game. We just see that we've been helped, and it makes sense that it would be us if we already knew.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense. It just like there's no like motive, like reason the game gives to think that we were motivated to do that.
Yeah, and I think we're just gonna have to try to look out in Dark Revival and kind of see like what kind of message there are, and hope like it would be nice to figure out how they're written. If that happens, then we might be able to figure out a lot more. So we just kind of have to put that hope into figuring that out in Dark Revival.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's gonna move on to our next topic. Oh,
Okay.
I clicked way too far ahead. So, I want to talk about corpses and coffins and who is alive and who's dead in real life. And these are all kind of related, maybe. First, I want to talk about the facts of a few corpses, the very few facts of Bendy that actually exist as facts. So, we know for a fact that Alice, Norman, and Bertrum don't disappear when they die. The only other things that leave corpses are the Butcher Gang, sometimes, and Boris's that have their heart skin. I know I keep hitting that mic. Now, there is a few different ideas out there to why that is. The Dreamfisher has an idea that all the corpses that don't disappear have damage to their hearts. So Boris and the Butcher Gang members who remain all have had their hearts removed, it seems, because for the Borises it's easy because they have their chest ripped open and you see no heart inside. And for the Butcher Gang, we do go around collecting their hearts, and they are near their hearts, but they're like removed from their bodies. So now that just leaves Norman, Alice, and Bertram. So Alice was stabbed in the chest by a sword, which could have damaged her heart. The speaker of the projections is near his heart, so it is possible that his heart was damaged or removed. And the Dreamfisher, as far as I saw, didn't mention Bertram in the theory, but Bertram's just ahead, so like he doesn't have a heart. So
True.
now, Ariel, you may be thinking, this sounds nice and all, but Shelby, I know someone who has damage to their heart, but they still disappear.
Of course.
Of course. Well,
Sammy.
that is Boris.
Boris.
And that is why I decided to look in his chest to double check. He does have a heart there. Well, the Dreamfisher explains that even though Brute Boris had his heart removed by Alice, he does have Butcher Gang hearts added to his body. So, had a heart of his time of his death, so disappeared. There's another theory, though, as to why these corpses stay instead of melted. And personally, I believe the next theory more overall, but I really like how this theory works better when you incorporate the Butcher Gang and the Borises. So maybe it's a combination of both of them. But I thought this one was really worth mentioning. So the next theory, oh boy, let me scroll through my notes. Okay. So the next theory is from Adobe Out Design, and we need to backtrack a little bit to get to this theory that relates to the corpses. But this will explain more than why the corpses stay. It explains a little bit more. So there's a total of 9 coffins in this game, but only 5 of them have names with invisible ink. So those names are Norman, Grant, Bertram, and Lacie, which you see here in Chapter 2.
Okay.
And then we have Susie, which is in Chapter 3.
Okay.
And these are all the rest of the other coffins that do not have names on them. And then you can see this is my proof of no names, and you can't pull out your scene tool. This is during the Haunted Mansion ride, so you can't pull out your scene tool during that part.
Okay.
So, the thing is, what do we know that happens to all these 5 characters? What connects these 5 characters? The one thing is that they all retain their memory from when they were alive, which is rare down here. So, Allison doesn't remember her own name. Sammy, especially in the Twitter posts here, That you will say things like he doesn't remember his hair color. Adobe Outdesign goes through more characters if you want the full theory, but basically we got lots of memory loss going on down here. But the thing is, those 5, as far as we can tell, they remember. So like Alice for sure, being Susie, remembers being Susie based off like what she says. Bertrum also remembers being Bertrum and how angry he is at Joey. Norman's a little harder since he doesn't really talk, but he does have a human body. And we don't have much to go off of for Grant or Lacie, but the reason they don't have their memories is that they're actually dead. So those 5 characters also have no notes in Joey's house. These are our notes. Allison and Tom get married, and Wally's on the beach. They have real lives in the real world, but not these 5. The idea is that those 5 are dead for real, while everyone else are just copies of the characters. Allison even says, 1 minute we don't even exist, just thoughts, and the next minute's this place. And you can even apply this to Henry too. So he could just be a copy with this amount of memory loss. We for sure know Henry's got some memory problems, so there is even a reason for all 5 of these characters to die. Susie was killed to make Alice. Norman always saw too much, so needed to be dealt with. Grant was unable to stop the studio's bankruptcy. He wanted to take Bendy land from Bertrum, and Lacie probably was a package deal. But the one thing these 5 have in common, 3 since we don't meet all of these in the game, is that when they die, their bodies don't disappear. Because they're actually there. It's their bodies in the studio, while everyone else disappears because they're actually alive in the real world, where these ones are actually dead. So the only thing this theory doesn't explain as much is why we have these bodies. So we still have the Boris and Butcherkin corpses everywhere then. The only idea is that whoever took their hearts knew how to kill them without making them disappear, or else they couldn't salvage the hearts. But with this in mind, why do you think some corpses disappear while others stay? And do you believe in this theory that some people might have died while some are just copies of people and are alive in real life?
Okay. I do like the second one. I like the idea.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good. I like that the copies of the ones that are alive in real life. But then I don't also know how to explain all the Borises and the Butcher gang.
Exactly. That's why I brought up both theories.
Yeah.
But it is hard. But what we can do, if we don't want to like discuss which one we believe and just kind of want to keep both in our mind, we can try to figure out like who's who, because we have 5 names on the coffins, but there's 9 coffins, plus there's lots of characters that we know of. Now, what's also interesting is that the Dreamfisher also found in the game that there's files of a few Invisible Ink works that seem like they would actually be on the coffins. These are not used in the game, but these are a collection of Invisible Ink writings that are not used. Now, I don't know if we want to use them or not, since they're not in the game currently, but the words that would work well would be Sammy, Sean, me, and question mark. The other problem is we want to use, do we want to use these names? Is because, like, Sammy doesn't disappear, like, he disappears when he dies and, reappears, but he, like, actually disappears, which goes against the other theory. So, Ariel, if you would like to go to the Google Doc, we're actually going to use one of our other things now.
Okay.
This thing I've prepared for us. Leave this doc. So if you would like to open up, what is this called? This is Alive versus Dead. I have made this lovely file that we both can edit. So if I've already filled in a few things, if we want to believe the theory of Alive has notes and Dead has coffins. And I threw in Joey Drew too, because we see him in real life, so that made me think he's alive.
Yeah.
This is if we want to figure out who the other 5 coffins? We have 4 coffins without names. I wrote no because I knew I'd forget. So we have 4 coffins without names. Now, and then over here is all the characters from that are not in Nightmare Run or Dreams Come to Life or Linda. This is the rest of the characters we know. If we want to, we can drag and drop and decide who's alive and who's dead for fun. And which you should be able to do too. The thing is, I realized if we have 4 coffins left and we don't believe these here, we only have 4 names left. But We can kind of decide,
Right.
like, if we want to believe the theory that if you're alive, you're disappeared, we want to put Sammy here as alive because he disappears.
Uh-huh.
But, like, it depends on what theory. Do we want to believe it's the heart getting injured that causes them to stay, or do we want to believe that they're alive in real life?
Okay, I guess let's try it believing that if they disappear, they're alive.
Okay. So then we'll put Sammy here as alive. What do we want to think for Henry? He
Now
does
this-
go into the ink, like we do. Like we don't see bodies of ourselves lying around. As
He
far
goes
as we're
into the
awake.
ink, and who doesn't go into the ink?
Well, Henry, like it's hard to tell because we are Henry. We don't see Sean. We don't see Jack.
Yeah,
And everyone
but-
else is already placed.
But so Tom and Allison couldn't go into the ink, right?
They couldn't. Yeah, they couldn't step into the ink.
So that makes us different from them, which makes me say dead.
Okay. Good idea. There's actually, I forget who. I think it's the Dream Fishers. Actually explains how, like, that ink thing goes more in their theory. I just didn't cover it because it was just, like, way too much. But they have, like, a theory that goes into, like, why certain characters can step into certain amounts of ink. But it's okay. I don't think, it doesn't apply, like, with their idea didn't apply too much to, like, our table that we're working with now.
Oh, okay, because it could have to do with who's alive in the real world and
I
who's
can hear
not.
why you mess with that. I'll go pull it up because I put all my links here. So
Wait, so who's Jack and Sean?
Jack, Sean is the one that did the dolls. That made the dolls. Jack is the one who lives in the sewer that wrote the lyrics for Sammy's music.
Okay. Do we think
so-
they're Butcher Gang?
No, Jack, actually, we see Jack. Jack, we kill him. We kill him, we
Oh.
smash him with the box. Smash him with his box, and his hat remains. I don't know if his hat should disappear or not. He might be dead. He might be really dead.
Yeah.
Because if his hat stays, I don't know if he formed with his hat or not. But he does. Because Sammy's mask. Do we see Sammy die with his mask? Sammy in chapter 5, after you do the scythe, I think his mask disappears too? Or do we knock it off? Hold on. Let me pull up that gif I had made. It's handy, I have these here. So let's see what happens to his mask.
Yeah.
It looks like it falls off.
Yeah.
So even though like he disappears, items that they have don't necessarily disappear. So we can't tell for sure. Jack is like, it's hard to tell because his body's smushed under a box. His hat remains, but apparently that doesn't matter as much because Sammy's mask also remains.
Yeah.
So you can put Jack wherever you want.
We don't know who Butcher Gang is, right?
No, we did have a very good theory I really liked before, but was very, like, is completely
Yeah.
unproven because Thomas was one of that, part of that theory. And obviously,
Right.
Tom is probably Thomas, so.
Because then we can make Sean alive too, and the rest of the 3 Butcher Gang can be dead.
Whoever is the Butcher Gang?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that. And we'll just put just 3 question marks. Whoever the Butcher Gang is, copy. That's the Butcher
Yeah.
Gang.
That's the Butcher Gang.
That's the Butcher Gang. Alright.
But if the Jack and Sean ink that people found were to be used on coffins, like where else would they be used if not on coffins, I guess?
Repeat that?
So you know how somebody found the art for the word Jack and the word Sean?
Yeah, this one right here. Like the...
Yes.
Yeah, so that's got Sammy, me, question mark, and Sean. So it doesn't have Jack. It has Sean.
Oh, it doesn't have Jack.
No, I put it here because I figured we'd probably have to reference it.
Yeah. So, because I feel like where else would Sean be written? Anywhere in, like, where could we trigger that besides onto a coffin?
That's the thing. But the thing is, these files here shouldn't like aren't in the game. Like they're like in the files, but they're not one of like the ones that I pointed out before that was like they're here, just need to be triggered. These are just ones that they shouldn't be able to be triggered. They were like maybe they had ideas. So that's why I was like, do we want to use them or not? Because that's also Sammy's in that list too. Yeah. So which throws some theories about. Do you want me to read the ink resistant theory?
Sure.
Okay. I'm gonna skip. Okay, maybe Allison and Tom are lying about being unable to touch ink, or maybe different types of ink creatures have varying levels of ink resistance. The Butcher King dies from standing in Bendy's inky aura, but their travel routes in Chapter 3 include areas completely flooded in ink. Allison and Tom claim to be unable to wade through the ink, but they have no trouble withstanding Bendy's aura. Susie is terrified to touch Piper's tainted ink, yet she uses thick ink from a fissure as a beauty product. So Chapter 3, Boris furiously steps into a room full of ink, and he doesn't seem hurt by Bendy's aura either, yet his body dissolves in the end. All of these are very confusing. It says, what makes ink creatures more resistant to ink than others? Well, they don't know. Maybe it depends on what type of ink they were made from. Is what they have. That's why I didn't like go through the whole thing, because it didn't lead to anything. Yeah. But it is very like it does go like based off what they said. You can see it goes back and forth about what different characters can resist different types of ink. So it doesn't. It's not very solid enough that we can like base anything from it. Yeah. Which is the thing. Which is why I didn't include it originally in my script. But yeah. But yeah, I like this idea. These guys are alive. We got those guys dead, and Henry and the Butcher Gang. But that's where we're going to end our part of this one. So, like, we only talked about 2 subjects, but it was very complicated 2 subjects. Yeah. So next part, we're going to talk about the books. I'll do a very brief review. And then I'm going to talk about, what am I going to talk about? Ink making people crazy, Sammy drinking some ink. We're going to talk about why there's only 6 altars in the beginning, like only 6 things to put on the pedestals to summon Bendy. So thank you guys for watching. See ya.
Bye.